So, making the most of your relationships. I'm so pleased to be joined by Rob Pike, National Sales Manager for Fort Garry Fire Trucks, Mike Fedenu, Sales Manager for Commercial Emergency Equipment, and Philip Gerace, Director of Dealer Development for Terex, which is formerly Rev Group. So welcome, guys. I have questions for you all. And after which we'll have a Q&A for the attendees. So use the Q&A or the chat. For those of you listening, you can put questions in at any time and we'll kind of have a check at 10:15 to see what we have lined up. So Rob, I will start with you. Fort Garry is known for its factory visits. What does a fire department learn during a factory visit that they won't learn in the brochure?
Hi, Laura, and thanks for the comment regarding Fort Garry. First thing that we talked about, fire departments actually get to see what other fire departments are doing. Big or small, left to right, add-ons, adjustments that they would want to incorporate into their apparatus. They literally get to see their brochures, their thoughts, their specifications, their pieces of paper becoming 3D. That hands-on, seeing what they're doing, moving from engineering that now is all 3D. They can literally see pump and plumbing and chassis movements and bodies and pump houses all coming together. They can walk out to that shop floor and literally see that building process and then move through the plant. So everything now becomes 3D. If they have any questions, comments, or concerns, they literally have access to it right at the plant. And that job flow, they can now understand how that entire process with their sales, their specification, engineering, contract administrators, and their final product right down to inspection is going to work.
Technology's taken us a long way, isn't it? Mike, what does customer service mean to you when working with a fire department?
That's a great question. First off, thanks, Laura, for having me here and the rest of us here. It's truly an honor to be sitting here as a panelist. And shout out to everybody in the room. I saw a couple of familiar names in the list there. Customer service is a tricky one, and it's different for everyone. But to me, it really means earning trust. It's earning trust by showing that we understand really the stakes that our customers face. And I mean, a lot of us have been firefighters at one point in time. We've got the idea as to what's happening there, but it really comes down to they are investing in something that's going to protect their people, their community, the surrounding areas for the next 15, 20, sometimes 25 or 30 years. And it's really incumbent on us to make sure that we honor that by being present, proactive, accountable, making sure that we're listening. It really starts with that listening piece. Every department's got something different that they need to do. It's a different operational demand. There's a different demographic, a different geographic area. We were speaking backstage about forest fires and how that's changed the landscape over the last little while. And I mean, these are all things that we, as it turns into customer service, we need to be listening to, and we are listening to, and we need to be looking at. But I mean, more than listening, it means making sure that communication is clear, it's transparent, and sometimes it can be crunchy. We want to make sure that all of those conversations that need to happen are happening on a timely basis, and then the communication flows properly all the way through. And that's, it's not just from us, it's from the clients that are buying the trucks as well. We need to have that open line of communication. But I mean, customer service goes long past just the initial procurement. It goes right through to delivery. So, making sure that we have the ability as vendors to service that truck long after we've delivered the truck. And that, again, the open line of communication, it's a big deal for us. It's a big deal for all of us that are here in the room.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Philip, from a vendor's perspective, how can a fire department work most efficiently with you?
Well, thanks for that, and thanks for being here. I think the important thing is as you work with your dealers is to have an understanding of really what your must-haves are and what you think may be optional for change, and really understand what the things are that have to be there. a lot of things can be done at the dealer level, a lot of things can be done at the manufacturing level. When you enter into that conversation, know your priorities, and then have a good vision for changes up front, because late changes can sometimes really affect delivery and pricing. So those are the sorts of things that as a department, if you're prepared. And I think you had mentioned visits. We like visits too. I think it's an opportunity to see, as it was said, what other people are doing, what can be done. It's a great way to expose yourself to a wide range of options.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Rob, in today's age of, modern procurement, things have changed and Canoe, how important or how evolving are personal relationships?
Um, Very important overall, knowing that spec, getting into that discussion of what it is you need, your customer service, your communication is going to be a big part of it, what you do. You need to very much take advantage of the salesman's knowledge back and forth because modern procurement involves so many changes that will affect your final build in engineering, electrical, lighting, plumbing, and just the wide range of options that you change one, the effect down the line can be great. So that customer service, that engineering, sales, your contract administrator, they are also aware of the NFPA and its capabilities, the company's capabilities. So it's a really good place to be able to build your truck from the bottom up and from the bumper to the tailboard. And the salesman can really walk you through it because they have the ability to pull resources from right across the country, the vendors, and internally within their engineering. So to build that relationship is really to the purchaser's advantage.
Okay, and actually, I'm going to open that question up for Mike and Philip as well, because it is a changing landscape. Mike, did you want to add on to anything Robert said there from your perspective?
Robert kind of hit a lot of stuff right on the head. I don't have a ton to add to that other than, the consortium purchasing and modern procurement and everything else has really made it very forefront to us that we need to have that communication early. You know, um, it really is about making sure that we get ahead of things as a group, not just from the vendor side, from the customer side of things as well, and having all of those conversations very early so that we can really determine what the needs are, what the wants are. As I'm sure everybody in the room understands, that's the landscape of things has changed drastically over the last 10 years. And what's available on the market today is different than what it was 10 years ago. So, being able to have those conversations early, honestly, openly, and completely upfront is, really creates a better product in the end.
Philip, did you want to add anything?
Just add again, work closely with your dealer. They have a wide variety of options that they can do at the dealership level, at the factory level. We're a big fan of the Canoe and the Sourcewell product out there for as an option for dealers to be able to offer to their end users. The dynamics of the market have changed a little bit. It used to be, totally custom trucks or stock trucks, and that there are more options available now. So I think, there's some conversations that can be had about other options between those two extremes.
So, well, let's build on that question there. Are there alternatives to having to choose between highly customized vehicle with a longer lead time and stock trucks that offer fewer options? What
Yeah,
alternatives are there?
yeah, we've developed sort of a mid ground. It's called a modular build product where you're not restricted like a cookie cutter product or a stock truck where everything's been pre-decided, pre-engineered to the point where there's nothing, but not every single item is totally custom. Sometimes you might have to take a 36-inch wide compartment instead of a 38-inch wide compartment, or some options there. But we've got some programs in place that are offering deliveries in a year or less for pumpers. 18 months or less for aerials, under $1 million for pumpers, using this modular concept of kind of taking a look at what the fire service does, trying to address about 80% of what the fire service selects, making that selectable options, and then allowing them to go ahead and choose from those options. And it's worked well for us. We've had a lot of customers that have either purchased these products and replaced what was totally custom products for them, or in some cases, just augment their fleets with some that have quicker deliveries and then order some other highly customized vehicle with a little bit longer delivery.
Okay, and Rob, actually, what are you seeing in that space in between the highly customized truck with bells and whistles and the stock side?
We're probably looking at, let's say 80-20, Laura. We are putting in 80% of what we would see a customer requiring, and then leaving about 20% in there that they could add probably the most common items. So an example would be, we'll set up our plumbing. It'll have a foam manifold in there, but it may or may not have the actual foam system. The tank will be set up with a foam cell and installed. And now if the customer actually wants to add a foam system, that is all pre-engineered as a package. So very much like Philip said, it's a module, except the foam system might be the module rather than the body, rather than the pump house itself. So those smaller items in there, pre-built in for shelving and slide out trays, it's ready to go. So a customer can literally outfit it and move up in the areas that are that extra 20% that we're seeing with the departments.
Okay. Mike, where do you see this trend going? I mean, do you see between being very customized, middle stock, what are you seeing kind of the most orders? Where's the most interest from chiefs you work with?
It's a really interesting question. And, I guess it depends on how far back you want to go. I've been doing this now this will be my 20th year working in fire trucks, and it's really a cycle. We see a cycle where we've got 5 or 6 years of lots of super custom orders, and it could be determined by a number of things, and then it'll drop off and it'll get super stock for 5 or 6 years. And it seems to be that wave. With everything that's happened in the industry over the last 5 or so years, we've been seeing that additional pressures are significant on municipalities, fire departments, anybody that's buying any apparatus. It's not limited to fire trucks either. It kind of goes all the way across the infrastructure, and financially, it's a huge push, right? I mean, there's pressure all across the board. So realistically, I think we're in the stock side of that cycle versus stock versus custom. But I think this is going to get extended. From what I can see inside that cycle, rather than it being 5 or 6 years, I see it being 10 or 15, where stock trucks, quick deliveries, that middle ground modular setup that Rob and Philip were talking about, or that becomes the majority of what gets purchased over the next, say, 10 or 15 years. I wouldn't be surprised to see it go more custom in the future, but I don't think that is the trend right now. I think we'll continue to see stock for quite some time.
So, and then Philip, because I know stock sometimes market is a faster option too to fire departments. So what are the biggest reasons, Philip, that you see currently that might cause delays in deliveries in the
Sure.
current?
Well, we're starting to normalize to some degree in terms of backlogs and that. But I mean, during COVID, we saw this extraordinary period of time where you had this perfect storm. You had a lot of really experienced workers leave the manufacturing space. I've been involved in fire service as a firefighter and as a manufacturer for 35 years. And there were guys that I could walk out to in the factory. I could scribble something by hand on a postcard, and they could build it and turn it into a very highly customized, great truck. Today, when new manufacturing employees enter the workspace, a lot of them don't know how to read a tape measure. So it's not the same people that were building trucks for the vast majority of my career. And then as lead times began to lengthen, products began to shortage, you ended up with this sort of panic buy departments who were were struggling, to buy every year, suddenly saw that lead times had extended, so they bought 2, 3, 4 years ahead, and you ended up with this huge backlog. It's starting to normalize, but you still have, this combination of factors of some longer backlogs. You have this inexperienced workforce that, when I was a young man, you stayed with your company for most of your career. Many people stay with the company their entire career. Today, I have 30-year-old kids that are on job number 6 because that's just the culture that we're in. So we're going to be dealing with these issues. I'd say, really the thing to do to deal with that is very clear on what your must-haves are, compromise where you need to in order to um, buy some of these modular solutions, things that are not as critical. We still will always build custom trucks. That's not something that'll go away. But I think there's an opportunity to reduce price, reduce lead times with these solutions. And, we talked about not making changes late in the process, but being very clear what's important to you. Your dealer then can help you make sure you get the right solution that meets all those critical needs so that you're not sacrificing protection, you're not sacrificing, important SOPs for your department, but that you can understand that there are some other options that you can either replace highly customized vehicles with, or you can just augment and say, hey, I'm going to buy 4 of these today, but I'm going to buy, some to get me through with a short lead time of under a year. That'll get me through while I'm waiting for these other apparatus.
Okay, thanks, Phil. So, Rob, when it comes to the front end, when you see the specs come in, from fire departments, are there do you see weaknesses where maybe the fire departments could improve on how those specs are submitted, or clarity or anything like that?
The biggest thing, sometimes fire departments are using old specs. Literally across the industry, my comment would be that I've seen bits and pieces, part and parcels of specs that were written even 5 years ago, that particular pump or chassis component literally no longer exists. So technology in some way is working against the departments. A fire chief is getting a spec from the fire department down the road, or Googling it, or bringing it in from somewhere and thinking, oh, if I update this, it's going to work for the truck I'm building today. And that's not necessarily the truth. In a lot of ways, they have to go back to their salesman or make sure that they're using an updated spec from someone that has just been through the process, and make sure those components are actually functional for the manufacturer. Because what they're doing is literally buying a fire truck that's already 2 years out. And if they're using a spec that's already 2 years old, they're now 4 years, plus Phil mentioned change orders and everything else. They literally could be working in a window of 4 or 5 years on an old spec, and the chassis changes, the truck changes are now going to catch them. The second part with that, I'd just like to really add to the fire departments, is the NFPA standards, the standards we work through in the industry, and the documents we have available to. Sometimes fire departments get bogged down in the real finite issues of a department, and sometimes they can do 2 things. They can let their salesman know what type of world they work in, what their true primaries that they must have, and then what are secondary, what are tertiary, and then from there be a little bit more performance based. Say you need to pump some water and you need 5 discharges, and the salesman can say, great, you can't put a 4-inch discharge at the operator panel. Where would you like it? And we'll give you that flow. So, give that little bit of give and take back to the salesman to help them with that, and just leave it as a performance-based spec.
Mike, do you see similar things in your role?
I do, and I don't think that there's no secrets here in the pudding. I mean, we're all building fire trucks. We're all kind of doing the same thing, and we all run up against the same struggles. I'll echo what Rob said. Old specs are usually the key piece that we really struggle with. I mean, I'm a firefighter, been a firefighter a long time, and if there's two things firefighters hate, it's change and the way things are. We're really good at just not wanting to do things any differently that we ever have been. And I mean, I fall into that same trap as well. But the truth of the matter is the world evolves around us and we can't get away from that. So being open to that change really helps out. When we're utilizing old specifications, it forces us to look at what the change might be. And it's to everybody's benefit to do that earlier in the process than say when it would hit the street as an RFP, or when you're publishing it to under a tender situation, or anything of the sort. We want to make sure that we get those dealt with earlier. To talk more about what Rob was saying, in regard to flexibility, an easy way to get around that, and something that I've used with great success with a lot of our clients, is to have the client develop a needs list and a wants list. And understanding within your budget, within your constraints, within the timeline, whatever's most important to you. Cover off all of the needs first, and then just start working down that wants list until you get to the point where you're done. And be flexible. It helps significantly to push through a better apparatus in the end that suits. Keeping in mind the whole, we're firefighters, we don't like change piece. Sometimes things have to change to make them better, and just be open to the change, to the process of change. I think most people would be very surprised as to what the professional sitting at the other end of the table can bring to the table in regard to solutions for that change.
Yeah. So Philip, on that note, how do you see sort of your role in helping with the specs process?
Right. Well, I mean, I think open communication with your dealer is important about when you intend to purchase as well. As we look towards for example, an emission change for the 2027 US EPA emission standards, there are big effects that are going to occur in some cases on those, because while the engines may be slightly bigger, the DEF systems and the exhaust systems are going to be about twice as big. So, I think just having that conversation about, when you intend to purchase, what sorts of things are important, and plan ahead so you can really understand the world is changing rapidly in terms of new products being introduced, new electronic systems, multiplex systems. So there's a lot going on, but I think it's just working with that dealer and saying, hey, this is when we're thinking about pulling this trigger, and they can sort of look ahead to see, what's coming and what's going to affect the overall configuration in terms of wheelbase, in terms of some of the storage in the cab, and perhaps even suctions and discharges as room will tighten up in the chassis area around the exhaust system.
And just going a little bit back to NFPA standards, this was on my original list, but it's come up. So, Rob, how much are you seeing fire departments building NFPA compliant trucks?
Oh, heavily. That is still one of their big listings as they go through. It's interesting here in Canada, we still see the ULC, but the ULC that basically references now 1901 with one or two exceptions. So even 515 has basically, opted out. It's no longer a viable option. Everything just references back to 1900. So that's an important thing to note. That sets out so many of the little components for a truck that it can also be, it takes into account a lot of things that a fire department would never think about. Step surface friction rating. Let's go with that one. It's not something you're going to see in a fire service spec itself, because the fire service takes it for granted that NFPA 1900 is out there looking after them. So that's a big part of it. The second thing I'll just say with all the NFPA standards is fire departments do have to at least look through them. And if there's something they didn't find on their last apparatus, ask their salesperson, why was this done there and why wasn't it done here? They can tell you. They're very familiar with the standards. And there's also a lot of documents that are complementary that fire departments don't know necessarily exist. The FEMA has an entire list of reference documents that fire departments don't even know that are there. And that would be my three comments: NFPA, ULC, and the FEMA documents.
Okay. Mike, are you seeing similar things? How do you work with fire departments on the NFPA compliance side?
It's really important for us as commercial emergency representing Pierce and the Maxi Metal brands, all the Oshkosh brands, to ensure that trucks are built to a standard. Specifically in Canada, it really doesn't, for us, it really doesn't matter which standard it is, but the liability exists that if you don't build a truck to a standard, you've opened yourself up as a municipality to holding that liability should something go wrong. So for us as a dealership, it's very, very important to us to make sure that the trucks that we build, the trucks that we sell, the trucks that we provide to our clients are held to a standard and tested as such. NFPA 1900 is the gold standard across the board, across the industry when it comes to that. And it's important to know too, for everybody that's listening, that it doesn't mean you necessarily have to follow every single piece of the standard. There are accommodations written into the standard where you, as the authority having jurisdiction, can decide to disregard a portion of the standard and sign that off. I'll give a great example. Throughout Canada, we've got many different regions that have many different thread specs for the different hose that goes on their trucks. BC and Alberta are largely similar, but they're a little bit different. Saskatchewan's different than Manitoba. Manitoba is different than Ontario, and so on and so forth. Under the NFPA standard, that thread spec needs to be a very specific specification. And in order to get away from that on the base thread of that truck, we need to be able to write an exception to that standard. And as the authority having jurisdiction, it makes sense to write the exception to that standard to say, hey, we're not putting NST threads on our trucks. We're not in Florida. We're in Alberta. We need to have an Alberta thread spec because this is written into our laws, and then our laws supersede the standard. So the liability is still covered in that sense. There's certain things that we can do to get around certain pieces of the NFP standard, but I think largely and as a whole, it's really, really important to make sure that we set the standard and understand what that standard is, and that we maintain that high level of standard throughout, the apparatus build process for, liability, safety, all of these things all came into play. I mean, it's important to remember that the NFPA standards are built over years and years and years of committees of apparatus manufacturers and fire chiefs and committee members, people on the floor that are looking at the problems that have happened over years and gone, how do we fix this? Right. So it's very important that we maintain that standard.
Yeah, and then Philip, so in the US where you have some experience down there, are you also, seeing mostly built to NFPA compliance, and that's a key part of working with your dealer?
Yeah, most of the trucks, the vast majority, almost all of our trucks are built to the NFPA standard. I will say, sometimes as these standards change from revision to revision, there's also this implication that somehow truck builders are looking to puff these standards up beyond, minimum acceptable standards to escalate that. But for the most part, fire apparatus manufacturers really just want the industry to guide themselves to decide what's most important. We're not really looking to puff it up. And in that case, I would say that the new 1900 standard, which will be released in a few years, is actually coming up for public comment. So I would encourage all of the spec writers and all those people who have an interest in what that standard says to go ahead. It's coming out of committee, the NFPA committee, and go ahead and review that carefully. There are a number of areas where there's virtually no change, but there are a number of areas where there's a lot of change, including occupant protection and airbags. So I would encourage everyone to take a look at that and avail yourselves of the opportunity to comment on areas that you feel strongly about.
Okay, so safety is an important one. Do you see, Rob, like a focus in the spec writing more so looking at firefighter safety?
They inherently they do rely on the NFPA standard. to look after their firefighters. I mentioned steps earlier. Phil mentioned, occupant protection, the airbags. In terms of pure, we don't see specifications necessarily saying the seating positions will have seatbelt. They tend to worry about the operational side, that seat will have SCBA seating. In some ways is more written into the standards inherently than that individual firefighter. So going back to that, it may be really good for fire departments to take 2 seconds and take it from the top, safety, everything we do. And then from there, work through literally a SWOT analysis, look at the strengths of what they won that apparatus, the weaknesses of their thoughts, of their designs, the opportunities they have. And Mike had said it, basically, their needs, their wants in through that area, and straight out threats. And that kind of ends with what Phil said, that there's going to be some big changes in NFPA. There's going to be some big changes in chassis and engines, and to take advantage of those changes, but also to consider, if you're going back to the safety line, to make sure that it's always forefront in everything you do.
So, Mike, when it comes to, I guess, working with fire departments too, what is one thing that you wish fire departments better understood about manufacturing and selling fire trucks? If they could walk a mile in your shoes, what would they learn?
When I first got into the fire truck business, a very, very wise person said to me, and this rings true throughout, it doesn't matter any time frame, anything. If you change the fuel tank, the mirrors won't fit. And it's a bit of a roundabout way to say every action has reaction all the way up through the truck. There's a ripple effect that happens for everything. So even though it may seem very trivial to, adjust one small item in one section of the truck, there could be a ripple effect that takes it all the way through the truck and affect 15 or 20 different items. The truth of the matter is we live in this every day, and there are times when we don't even know what that ripple effect is going to be without actually understanding what goes together and through the truck. So, I guess if there's one thing that I wish fire departments better understood, it's that, when we get into building custom fire apparatus, we are really taking our best shot in the dark until it hits, an engineer's hands, or, in some cases, the production floor, to really determine what fits together and what doesn't. Best educated guess has really become, the best end of the play. And for the periods that we've done this, as long as we've been in it, and Phil says he's been this more than 30 years, there's a lot of stuff that he's seen, right? There's a lot of things that Phil's understood about a fire apparatus and what goes together and what doesn't, and how their body interacts with their torque boxes and so on and so forth, what they can and can't do. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a wild card that's going to get thrown into the mix that will completely change everything all over again. And we learn along with you when it comes to that. So I guess if there's anything that I wish you knew as a fire department, fire chief, committee lead, it's understanding that the truck goes together, depending on the manufacturer that you pick. The truck goes together a certain way, and everybody has their certain specific processes, and those really determine what you can, what you can't, or what you should or shouldn't do on an apparatus. So to take it all the way back to the beginning, take the trip and go visit these manufacturers. Visit Pierce, visit Fort Garry, visit Rosenbauer, visit E1, visit all of these manufacturers, as many as you can, and understand their processes, right? Take the time to understand how these trucks go together, and it will really open up a large volume of knowledge for you to understand, what it is that we are up against, and what it is that ultimately you, as the consumer, as the customer, as the fire department, is up against when it comes to specifying these apparatus.
So, Philip, what part of the process, in your day-to-day, do you wish that fire departments, fire chiefs and procurement teams understood a little bit better?
Well, I think part of the frustration that I've had over the years is not with the fire chiefs, but maybe with the people who are funding the fire departments, to be honest with you. I think that, I was working with the Fire Apparatus Manufacturers Association, FAMA, and was also with FEMSA. And one of the things we looked at over the years was trying to understand how fire departments decided what sort of fleet replacement plan they would use, whether they were going to use it on repairs, on mileage, on age, some combination, that sort of thing. And I think what we found as we began to poll fire departments across North America is we found that there was a large majority that didn't really have a great plan. And I don't think that's because the fire chiefs and the mechanics didn't want it. I think is they weren't able to fund it and get their support. So one of the things that I'm hoping is that those organizations, those government bodies that are tasking the fire department respond on more and different types of situations every day, to understand that they need to get those fleet replacement plans. They need to make some commitments in terms of supporting them. There's an ever-changing threats, and as we talked about, more fires, more storms than ever before. But helping those departments set up a replacement plan that looks 7, 10, 15 years down the road so they can adequately prepare for population growth, for change where that population lives, for market conditions, for delivery timeframes, for pricing, and support those fire departments in having a plan that works for their area.
And Rob, what do you see? What do you see in this realm, your day to day? Oh, I just wish I could provide a little education on this
You,
piece of my day.
I guess two things. First off, and I would probably say this is true right across the industry, the manufacturers spend a lot of time producing social media, presenting our recent deliveries, compiling our pictures, our line drawings, and sometimes a fire department literally just has to say, here's our basics, here's our performance-based items, and can you literally send us what you are thinking, what you have in the drawing books of your 1,000 or 2,000 trucks? What would be closest to what you think would work for us? Here's our list of literally priorities of water. What have you built and what do you do at best? Rather than trying to find pieces and parts and trying to fit a truck together, sometimes it's easier to work out from what the manufacturers have already built. So that's literally ask them, and then ask them for the references. Ask the fire departments what they would have done differently when we like that truck, we like that truck, we like that truck. Ask for the references to see if they actually did, like their truck or what they would have done. So the salesman, again, we're back to that customer service. Show us. And then if you're writing that specification or you're going to public procurement or RFQ, always build in there the ability to go back and clarify points or make changes with the manufacturers who did bid. So if you need to, you can go back to general questions and say, clarify this point, because if you've put a line item in there that excludes everybody, and the word exclusion in an RFQ can be very difficult for the fire department to measure at the end of the day. If no manufacturer can meet that requirement or any requirement, you go back to, hey, everybody stumbled on line 20 of our procurement. Well, something's wrong with line 20. Allow yourselves the room to go back to the bidders and say, okay, we need to reword this or we need to redo it. So simply ask the manufacturers what they do best and what they have to offer that would be closest to your spec. Take advantage of it. From there, come to the factory for your pre-construction, so you're not scrambling at the end or it's costing more or you didn't get the product you were after. Make sure you're at that factory for sure during that pre-construction.
Thanks, Rob. We're getting some great advice from you guys today. And we started a wildfire conversation kind of ad hoc in the backstage there that I just thought was in an interesting direction. We have a little bit of time, so I kind of just wanted to circle back and, ask each of you what kind of changes you think trend-wise may take place with purchasing fire trucks, considering this increased involvement of municipal departments and, you know, this more working together of the forest fire services and municipal departments. And I guess, Rob, I kind of started it with you, so I'll pick on you first here and then we'll go around.
Thanks, appreciate that, Laura. Um, um, Terminology has changed. I started in the fire service. You wanted a triple combination pumper. And I don't think 30 years later, if you asked a fire department what a triple combination pumper and it all entails, but I've been quickly polling people as they come through our place. And literally, when I say, you know, are you looking for this to meet type 3 requirements? That whole forestry service, type 3, type 5, you know, through the tactical tenders, that terminology has really crept into the structural firefighting world. And a lot of that is because of the agreements that municipalities and the provinces are starting to make to adjust to that. So that's a big part of it. We're also seeing municipal fire departments being deployed out to forest fires, and we're seeing those forest fires in that urban interface doing exactly what it's aligned to do. Is it's affecting communities. So a fire department, and it doesn't matter how large or how big or how urban they are, if they don't consider wildfire somewhere in that specification, whether it's as simple as putting 150-foot hose reel on that truck, then they really aren't planning for that, because even the largest urban areas, you have parks and playgrounds and those areas brushed along railroad tracks that haven't burnt, haven't been cleaned for years. And at some point, even most urban departments are going to be fighting a wildfire that is going to need a lot of resources. So 10% for a fire chief that they need to think wildfire on any truck.
Thanks, Rob. Philip, what do you think? How's it changing?
I think we are seeing, there's a study done, as I said, there are more storms, there are more fires. So you're going to see more 4x4 solutions in places that typically hadn't bought them. We're also seeing comfort within the cab to recognize that sometimes, as was said by Rob, you've got municipal departments being deployed to other more rural locations to respond to wildfires. So they might have a long drive. It might be an hour and a half drive till they get to the fire. So there's considerations about what that sort of looks like, what the top speed looks like, what the seating looks like. So definitely seeing more of that and more considerations to deal with those issues, even in urban settings for sure.
Mike?
I have a different take on this, and maybe a bit of a hot take, and I might be throwing a grenade into the room here, but I'm in central Alberta, and we're right now over the last, I guess, 5 years or so, we've kind of been the hotbed of that type of activity. Every province is doing things a little bit differently as to how they're preparing for certain events, and I can speak to the province of Alberta a little bit, and a little bit across kind of the western provinces, but it seems that throughout Canada, there's it's become a bit of a closest, most appropriate resource situation where, if something were to break out, there's an interface issue, there's a wildfire issue that requires more resources. The provinces themselves are going to reach out and say, what do you have available to you, and how can you come and help us? My opinion, however, as a firefighter, as a battalion chief in my department, though, is home comes first. We really need to make sure that, although it's a consideration, the wildfire piece is an absolute consideration. We need to make sure that we're protecting our own first, and that means looking at what do we need, right, as a municipality. So, one thing that I've seen a lot of people do, I guess a lot of our clients do from the fire truck manufacturing side of things, is try to make one truck do everything. And in my own opinion, although it's got some merits, in my own opinion, I don't think it's the right way to do things. If you can get one apparatus that does one or two or three things very, very well, it makes a lot more sense to do that than it does to take one apparatus and make it do everything. We don't need to build an aerial that's got 3,000 gallons of water on it. All of that being said, the consideration is there when it comes to wildfire. It needs to be properly weighted with the needs of your community first, if that makes sense.
It does. I like that we get different takes on it. And we've got a question that's rolled in, so we'll pop over and answer that one. Anyone can start putting questions in any time here. We've got, what would you recommend to municipal firefighting services that are looking to transition away from AFFF? Does anyone want to put their hand up for this one?
I guess I could start with that one. I guess first clarity piece is AFFF is aqueous film forming foam, right? The Class B foam, and I'm assuming this has to do with a lot of industry pushes away from PFAS and PFOS and those types of things.
Mhm.
And the unfortunate part is I don't know that we can answer that question here in this forum specifically because this is, we're looking at the truck specification as it stands. I don't know that any of us would be able to recommend a specific foam as an alternative. What I can tell you though is as a apparatus manufacturing industry, kind of throughout the industry, we are keeping a very close eye on what's happening through the industry and what those trends are, and making sure that we have the correct items available to departments to choose, should they want to make the switch away from AFFF as an example. Going to another Class B foam that may have a viscosity rating that's a little bit higher. We have foam systems that are available that'll do that. But it kind of goes back to that initial piece when we talk about the customer service. Communicate that and communicate it early, and let us be a part of the conversation so that we can help you determine what's going to be best for the apparatus that goes in.
As we move away from those PFAS foams, there have been a number of solutions, so-called green foams, that have been introduced to the market. They generally work in similar ways with the same hardware, the different types of hardware, whether it's an adductor or whether it's around the pump or some other solution for foam. I know at my time while I was working with Task Force Tips, we actually engaged our department to find the top 10 foams around the globe that were green foams and do viscosity studies. Some of the foams came out, the new solutions came out very similar viscosities, but some were very different, and they ranged from much more viscous to much less. And so working with those vendors to understand that, I think there's an opportunity to simply just adjust the calibration of your unit and then just move over to these green foams if that's of interest to you. And I think all of us probably offer solutions that can handle that.
Okay, thanks, Philip. We've got another question come in. Some custom chassis are arriving with more defects and warranty issues than in the past. What quality controls and supplier verification are you using to ensure the chassis you receive doesn't have those early life failures? Rob, did you want to take this one first?
Well, I guess the first thing we do is when we put together our chassis specifications, we look at what the customer wants, and that runs through engineering. And we spoke a little bit about that earlier, that engineering and the line drawing, make sure that all the components line up to the customer specification. When the order goes in, very much, we get the updated specification back from the manufacturer. And then when it arrives at our facility, complete arrival inspection is what it gets. And then through the system, very much take your ownership as anybody on the shop floor, anybody working with electronics. They're responsible if they've worked on something, see a problem, see a concern, it moves up the chain till it's addressed. And then our testing at the end of the day, both in our testing for NFPA as well as our road tests and everything else, we try to literally eliminate any additional problems for the customer. We're also lucky in a lot of ways in the fire service builders. We're driving our trucks 2,000 kilometers before it gets to the customer. And with any luck, any of those problems and issues are worked out before they even get there because they've had some time. So as a customer, don't think 20 hours on a diesel engine and 2,000 kilometers on your fire apparatus is necessarily a bad thing either. It helps you.
For sure. Mike?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. First off, thanks for the question, Larry. I appreciate it. We're in a bit of a different situation on our side of things, just simply because we're vertically integrated as a manufacturer. So the custom chassis that we produce are our custom chassis. That doesn't mean that we're building every piece, right? We may build the cabs, and we may specify what the frame rails are, and we may specify what the engine is, but we're not necessarily building the turbocharger, and we're not necessarily building the radiator, and all of these components that go into it. And as manufacturers, a lot of these items are common throughout the industry. So that turbocharger that we're using on the Cummins engine is the same one that E1 is using on their trucks. It's the same one that Fort Garry is using on their trucks. There's a few pieces that we really hone in on for each and every manufacturer that does things just a little bit differently. Where I see we sit in a bit of a unique circumstance, being that we're vertically integrated, it's that rather than ordering a chassis to a specification, we're ordering the individual components that go on that chassis and just making sure that they all work together with each other. We've got a vast group of engineers that ensure that each of those components works together, and that those components are going to work together down the line on the apparatus. To speak a little bit to your comment or your question, Larry, about making sure that the chassis don't have those early life failures, I think I speak for all manufacturers when I say we've all had those certain trucks that just they just seem to be the one-off that never seems to go. We as manufacturers, we don't want that to happen. We want to make it right. We want to make sure that they're working well for you. On our side of things, on the Pearson Oshkosh side of things, we have what we call CARB, which is our Corrective Action Review Board, CARB. And we actually monitor every single piece throughout the fire apparatus, throughout everything that we deliver, all 2,000, 2,200 trucks a year that we do, to make sure that we identify common failures that happen throughout everything. And then any major failure that happens goes through this same Corrective Action Review Board. We've got individually designated engineers that sit and do specifically this, just to make sure that we can catch those failures early when they happen in the field, and then figure out what the review is for that and put them into circulation on the next trucks upcoming. So it's a continuous corrective action thing that always happens in the background for us, no matter what's happening. So every time a warranty claim comes in, we're always looking at it. We're getting to root cause. We want to make sure that we eliminate that. Not saying that they're not going to happen. They're absolutely going to happen. These things are built by people. Stuff's going to go wrong. We just want to make sure we take care of it when it happens. Even a little bit further back beyond the line, Larry, we want to make sure that, while we're sourcing the correct products for the trucks, that they're able to be serviced throughout the lifetime of the trucks. So, it's a complex question, but the simple answer to the complex question is we're continually looking for better ways to do the same job. And in most cases, able to find those things. It's just unfortunate that sometimes these things have to break in order for us to fix them. If there's anything specific that, that you're worried about or that you're looking at, I'd be more than happy to take the question offline. But, we take these things very seriously, and we want to make sure that, uptime is really at forefront across the board.
Okay, Philip, did you want to build on that?
I think those guys did a great comment. We have our own internal systems. We do build highly complex custom chassis. Our Spartan brand does chassis for other manufacturers as well. So we get a good learning from those partners that we have that purchase our Spartan chassis. Internal review process for quality control. We try to keep it at the manufacturing level, not at the end. We have a very defined process for all of that. And we also work with our suppliers to really provide feedback in that route back to make sure that if there are issues that are starting at component level, that they're getting the feedback that they need as well through our procurement team.
Okay, so Larry had a follow-up question. I'm going to get to his, and then Grant has a question. Something came up this morning that we'll address. So from Larry's one, do you suggest our EVT mechanic complete a pre-construction site visit to validate or inspect the chassis. Is that Mike's not?
I
Yeah.
think it's always good for an understanding and, for them to understand. And if there are requirements about how a wiring loom is done, of how certain components are done beyond just the, hey, you got to look for rub points and that's thing, that they're always welcome to do that. We also hold a fire truck trainers conference every year at our facility in Michigan. And so that's the fire truck training conference where those EVTs are invited to not only get EVT testing on site, but to also meet with suppliers. And everyone is welcome. Not only is it Rev, in our E1 Spartan Ferrari KME people, but even personnel from other competitive brands. We've got Pierce dealers showing up at the facility, and then a whole host of fire department personnel from all over North America are there. So we think that's an important thing to help with that beyond just visiting the factory.
Okay. So it says, as discussed, so this was this morning, this came up, the Cummins X10 will become the standard engine for many manufacturers. This engine features many changes, including a 48-volt alternator. How are the manufacturers preparing to assist the end users with servicing challenges? Maybe starting with you, Rob?
Well, I think the first, we're in a little bit of a hurry up and wait with the engines themselves. If it came up in your earlier discussions, how they're going to change the apparatus or what requirements are in there. The apparatus manufacturers themselves are looking for that information so we can pass it along. Specifically, we're going to have to learn from the engine and the exhaust manufacturers how they want the true service, how they want the true operation, how they want the true break-in periods of those engines, troubleshooting, and how to also make sure the customers know if there is any recalls or changes that they have to make operationally are truly laid out for them here in the future. So that's what I would see a lot of our responsibility is, and then the manufacturers, how they want to do are set up for repairs and improvements for those trucks over the next couple of years in engine systems. But I think we really are going to have to make sure our information and communication lines are very clear to the customer with those engine changes.
Okay, Mike?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, it's one that weighs on a lot of us, and it has been weighing on a lot of us for many years, because in some cases, we really don't know either. We're at a point now, I think, throughout all of the manufacturers where we understand what the components are going to look like. I think many of us have been through the initial R&D and testing of these components to understand how that's going to work with our units. But as it comes to servicing and challenges, status quo really rings to mind here. We've got a strong dealer network and every manufacturer's got a very strong dealer network that wants to make sure that everybody's taken care of. And our EVTs on my side of things, and I'm sure on Rob's and Phil's side of things as well, are continually training to make sure that they understand how things work. And things always change. We need to make sure that we stay on top of it. We've got half a dozen level 3 electric vehicle technicians sitting in our powder shop. There's a couple of different things that manufacturers do that will help out. I'll speak to ours specifically. Pierce has an entire Pierce Master Technician program that we offer to all of our customers, where we pick things off into modular bite-sized pieces, whether it be engines, aerials, cabs, multiplex systems, so on and so forth, specific to the Pierce trucks themselves, but the kind of overarch, and put them into courses just so that everybody's able to understand what the serviceability of these things are and how to service them properly, with a big scary exam at the end if you want to take it as a master technician. Those pieces are infinitely valuable when it comes to stuff like this, and we are constantly updating them. So I can foresee in the future, once 2027 EPA hits, we've got a few of these in the field, there will be another course for that. And I know we won't be the only manufacturer that's pushing that through. We want you to be as comfortable with the apparatus as we are. And, the truth of the matter is it's going to take a little bit of time to get to the point where we're all very comfortable with the change. But it's March now. I would imagine that in about the next 12 months, we'll see that shape itself out.
Philip?
We've actually purchased each of the engines that are coming, the new engines, the 2X10 versions and the X15. They're advanced models. They're not for they're not for sale per se today, but their purpose is for us to install them into our chassis and to go ahead and test them. We've got to pass certain testing to be able to offer these, make sure that our cooling is sufficient and all of the things are in place. We're learning a lot of lessons. We've just finished our first X10. We're putting the second X10 in and another chassis as well. As they go through, they're going to go through a lot of testing. They're going to go through cooling. They're going to go through driving thousands of miles. So what we're doing at this point is we're generating a list of things and effects that this configuration will have, and generating that document and for distribution to our dealers. That'll say, hey, are there effects on overall cab height? Are there effects on the ability to put front suctions in? What are the effects? So we're just finishing up as we do each of these models, those effects. You'll be able to meet with your dealer and understand what effects there are. And we'll be ready to be specifying engines with some level of certainty in the near future. Cummins unfortunately hasn't finalized on the warranty issue of the exhaust system. They haven't quite finalized on the final pricing of it. There's still a lot of unknowns. We're all trying to buy trucks that are going to be built post January 2027. They're not used to that sort of lead time. So we're all working through trying to do that. But I think, from our perspective, is we bought the advanced engines and we're putting them in chassis now. So we'll have a better picture in the near future.
Okay, we've reached the end of our time. I don't want to go too long. There's a couple other questions. Are you okay with another few minutes to answer? Or did you want, or I could send them out later? Let's go ahead now. Okay. So Tash says, how do you choose? And this will wrap the questions though. We'll just do these last two. How do you choose who to reach out to for the initial spec discussion? And don't mind me, I just realized my computer became unplugged here. So go ahead, Mike, do you want to field that one first? Who's the initial
Sure.
spec discussion start with?
Sure. Thanks, Natasha. The initial spec discussion needs to happen internally, right? Understanding what the needs are that you need, that your department needs, that the department wants, that sort of things. But then after that, it makes a lot of sense to reach out to your trusted local dealers, whoever they may be. There are a lot of manufacturers that are out there that, like I say, they use their dealer networks. If you've got local dealers that are trusted, that have got a great reputation, that's a great place to start. Don't limit it to one. You're going to want that conversation to happen, not necessarily in a vacuum, but amongst 2, 3, 4 different manufacturers, whoever's in your area that can service the area. And I think it's really important to understand that, when you purchase a truck, after all of this is said and done, that truck needs to live in that facility and needs to be serviced in that facility. So if you start the conversation with the people that are local, the people that are going to be servicing that unit, those dealers that are working with you to make sure that those are correct for your area, it'll end up in a product that will service you in the long run. So my recommendation would be to stay to your local dealers to start, and don't limit it to one. Go to 2 or 3 or 4.
Philip?
Yeah, I agree. The local dealer is your first best stop. If you're not sure who your local dealer is, you can certainly reach out to the brand. That local dealer has been working us, they're a real partner. And quite frankly, if there are other resources we need to bring an aerial specialist in, or somebody that's specialist on ARP or some other solution, they know who to do, and we're happy to work. We want to stay close to our end users and to our dealer partners, but that dealer will have that list of resources and call in whatever we need to do, including arranging for any visits to our factories or from us to visit the fire department.
Rob?
Well said, gentlemen. Local dealer. And I will just say again, sometimes you contact your local dealer with an initial spec, and he can literally point to a truck they've delivered right down the road, and a 1-hour trip, and you can see and hear from a department that's bought. from that truck, and you didn't even know it was there. So that's always a thought, and those local representatives are always aware of the difficulties and the good and the bad and the ugly in the area that they serve.
All right, one last question. How has the issue of tariffs affected the pricing of fire apparatus now and going forward? So budgets are on the mind of fire chiefs, so we'll make sure this question gets out there and which I'll have a quick answer on that one and then we'll sign off.
From our perspective, certainly the on again, off again has added some level of uncertainty. While many of the materials and products that we use are North American, the components have several, that we buy to put in the truck have several different origins. So there's certainly an effect. It's hard to pin down, but really a fire truck is often an assembly of some manufactured content and a whole bunch of components that come from a whole bunch of different vendors. So it varies, but they certainly have had an effect on the overall pricing of trucks.
So, get in a little bit more detail with that. We classify our suppliers in levels. We've got level 1 suppliers all the way through to our level 4 suppliers. And it's based on how close the relationship is with us. When we look at our level 1 suppliers, the majority of them are North American. I mean, we build everything North American that we can. But as it goes down into the level 2, 3, and 4 suppliers, we start getting into the same types of issues. That Phil, I'm sorry, my settings may have changed here. Can you still hear me, Laura?
Yeah.
Okay. So we start getting into different levels, and it does have an impact on pricing, but not a direct impact to necessarily the overall apparatus price, just to the individual components. And a lot of manufacturers have been absorbing some of that, and some of it's been passed on in general price increases. For the Canadian side of things, though, I can speak to the tariff portion, the big scary number, that big 25%. And what I can tell you is that doesn't happen unless our government decides that they're going to put on that tariff for our apparatus. So the majority of what we're going to see is very similar to what's going to be seeing in the United States, where the components are going to go up, and all of those things tend to go up with time. But as of today, as it stands today, fire apparatus as a whole are not subjected to an overarching tariff coming into Canada.
Okay. Rob, did you have anything to build on that, or?
Yeah, we've been watching that very closely. Our advantage of a Canadian manufacturer is we haven't put tariffs out to the rest of the world. So if we can source an item other than the US, then we don't have to cross that border, cross that line. So we've been good. Like Mike said, it's as long as our government of Canada doesn't put counter tariffs on, we've been able to maintain that position. But like Phil said, a lot of the major components for the fire trucks come out of the US. So any increases on tariffs going to the US reflect back here to the Canadian manufacturers as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to note that, when we look at that sort of stuff, there's a lot of things that as Canadians, we're just not going to be able to get around. We've got an internally built brand as well when it comes to wildland fire apparatus. And still, I mean, the pumps that we're getting are coming out of the United States. A lot of the components that we're getting are coming out of the United States. These are industry standard pieces that have been industry standard for many, many years. So, it really doesn't seem to make a difference. We represent US manufacturers. We have our own Canadian manufacturer, and it really doesn't seem to make that much of a difference, just simply because a lot of these industry standard components are standard across North America. It's not limited just to Canada. So we are going to see the struggle, and we're going to continue to see it, for I'm sure some time, until world markets tend to stabilize, which I think, without calling out the elephant in the room, I think we all understand who that is. So we'll get past it. It's going to be a little more expensive from here moving forward, though, I'm sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Rob, Mike, and Philip. It's been a great discussion. Really appreciate your time and expertise, and I'm sure everyone did watching as well. So that wraps up Firefighting Canada's first Insight Exchange. Thank you to our gold sponsor, Niederman, silver sponsor, the Fire Group, and bronze sponsor, Air Technology Solutions, for supporting today's conversations. A recording of the event will be sent to all of you in about a week. So thank you for your attention, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your day.